Good evening, and tonight you wake as a 1950s housewife in a ranch-style house on a tree-lined suburban street in the American Midwest, circa 1955, where a chrome percolator can seem to judge the whole coming day by the sound of its very first gurgle. Lorado in Johannesburg and Megan in Yorkshire both commented on the last video and stayed until the end, and I am glad you are here again. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Lorado and Megan did. And if you would like, please like and subscribe so you can fall asleep easily with every episode. Have you ever wondered how a day can feel both completely ordinary and somehow as full as a whole small world? The house takes you in before the story says a single proper word. The formica feels cool under your fingertips. The sink smells faintly of dish soap and yesterday's bacon grease. The refrigerator holds its one long note in the corner. And even in the dark, you can somehow feel that Betty Hargrove's lawn is greener than yours. You are already barefoot on the cold linoleum in Millbrook Heights, Ohio, on a Wednesday in October 1955. With the percolator working, the ironing pile waiting, Gerald expecting pot roast by evening, and your uncertain Jell-O resting in the refrigerator like a quiet domestic dare. You wake before the alarm says you must. The bedroom is still dark enough to keep its secrets. The clock face glows weakly beside the bed. Its little alarm hand points toward 5:45, with the calm certainty of a school principal. For a moment, you stay exactly where you are. The blanket still holds the shape of your knees. The sheet feels cool where it has slipped loose near your ankles. Beside you, Gerald breathes with the steady innocence of a man who has not yet considered breakfast. His hat is not on his head yet. His opinion about tonight's pot roast is not in the room yet. Right now, he is only a warm outline under a blanket. That is a comfort. You turn your head and look at the clock again. You have beaten the alarm by 11 minutes. 11 minutes is not a grand amount of time. In this house, though, 11 minutes can belong entirely to you. That makes it feel rich. You ease the blanket back slowly. The air finds your legs at once. October is in the room before the sun is. Your feet search for slippers and do not find them. They find the floor instead. The floor receives you with a firmness that feels almost personal. You stand very still for one breath. Then you gather your robe around you. The belt twists the wrong way first, because that is how mornings like to begin. The robe is cotton and soft at the sleeves. One pocket sags a little from old clothespins and a folded shopping list that never quite leaves it. You pat the pocket by habit anyway. Your hair is still tied up from the night before. The scarf over it makes you feel faintly practical and faintly ridiculous. In the half-dark, both are fine. You step into the hall and close the bedroom door with careful fingers. The latch gives a soft click. It sounds louder than it should. The house is quiet in the layered way a sleeping house is quiet. The pipes hold their own stillness. The floorboards keep their small thoughts to themselves. This ranch house likes to pretend it is simple. It spreads itself low and plain across the lot. It asks for very little poetry from the outside. Inside, it contains an entire weather system of tasks. There is one short rise near the back where the floor changes level, just enough to make the house only mostly ranch style. Gerald likes to say the builder could not commit. You step down it carefully now. At this hour, the little change in height feels more dramatic than it really is. You are descending into the kitchen. The kitchen greets you with smell before shape. Dish soap sits fresh and clean near the sink. Yesterday's bacon grease lingers in a tin by the stove with stubborn confidence. The refrigerator hums its one patient note from the corner. It never sings harmony. It doesn't need to. You reach for the switch and bring on the small light over the sink. It throws a pale yellow circle across the counter. The rest of the room stays gentle and dim. The formica countertop is cool under your palm. Its smoothness wakes you more politely than the alarm ever could. The chrome edge at the corner feels faintly cold and exact. There it is. The percolator waits on the counter, like a silver aunt who has arrived before anyone else and expects to be appreciated. You remember the grounds already waiting inside. You remember filling the water yesterday evening while the supper dish is dry. You remember thinking kindly of your future self for once. Morning thanks evening with a nod. You set the plug in place and turn the little control. For a breath, nothing happens. The room holds still. Then the first small sound begins deep in the pot. It is not yet a proper perk. It is more of a throat being cleared. You lean one hand on the counter and listen. This is part habit and part weather report. The household mood barometer is now on duty. A brisk, cheerful gurgle means the day may be busy, but it will stay within normal law. A slow, uncertain drip means the ironing pile has grown overnight, and the Jell-O will choose disobedience. This morning, the sound begins with hesitation. You narrow your eyes at it, with mild suspicion. Then it gathers itself and finds a steadier rhythm. That is good enough. You are not asking for miracles before dawn. You are asking for coffee that remembers its job. The percolator gives another confident burble. You take this as a pact. While it works, you move around the kitchen in the careful, practiced way of someone who can find the sugar with half a brain still asleep. The cupboard door opens with its familiar catch. The spoon jar waits near the stove. You set out a mug that is thicker than you would choose now, but sturdy enough to survive your whole married life. Its handle has a small chip near the base. Your thumb fits around it exactly. It is not pretty, and that makes it reliable. On the table sits last week's women's magazine. Its cover smiles at you with impossible pie crust and impossible energy. It is basically a lifestyle influencer in paper form. Inside, it offers recipes with ingredients your grocery store has never met. It also offers a quiz about whether your husband is truly happy. At 5:36 in the morning, the magazine may wait. The kitchen table is small and sensible. The chrome trim catches the weak light. One chair wobbles if someone ambitious leans too far left. You sit in the least wobbly one and listen to the coffee deepen. Outside the window, the street is still mostly dark. The maples along the curb are only shapes. The lawns are flat gray panels for now. Betty Hardrove's yard is across the street and slightly to the left. Even before sunrise, you suspected of looking better than yours. Some people have that effect on grass. Betty is not cruel. Betty is simply efficient in a way that suggests invisible rehearsal. Her Jell-O molds leave their dishes in one clean, shining ring, as if they are grateful to her. Your own Jell-O is in the refrigerator right now, considering its options. You glance at the refrigerator door as though it might answer on behalf of the mold. It continues humming. Its neutrality is impressive. The coffee is ready enough for the first cup before it is perfect. This is one of the useful truths of married life. You pour anyway. Steam rises against your face. The smell reaches you a half second before the heat does. It is dark, plain, and very nearly medicinal in the best possible sense. You add cream and watch the color turn from stern brown to a softer tan. You add sugar because this is not a morning for heroics. The spoon taps the side of the cup 3 times. Those taps sound wonderfully private. You take the mug to the table and sit with both hands around it. The warmth enters your fingers first. Then it travels up your wrists and into the rest of you. The first sip is too hot. You take it anyway. The second sip tastes like permission. These are your 11 minutes. Nothing grand happens in them. No trumpet sounds. No one places a medal around your shoulders for rising before dawn to make other people's sandwiches. Still, a kitchen before the rest of the house wakes belongs to you in a rare and complete way. The clock on the wall ticks above the calendar. The calendar shows a cheerful apple for October. The apple looks much less tired than you feel. Wednesday begins to assemble itself in your mind without asking. It does this every week. It is very organized about it. The beds need stripping today. The white shirts need pressing. The ironing pile on the chair has the compact height and confidence of a small child. There is the grocery trip to the A&P. It is essentially Amazon Prime, except your legs provide the delivery window. Carl at the meat counter is the recommendation algorithm, and nobody accepts returns on a doubtful roast. You will need carrots. You will need onions. You may need gelatin again, though the phrase may need gelatin fills you with a private wariness. There is also the question of bread. There is always a question of bread. Bread behaves as if it evaporates when no one is looking. You think of the vacuuming in the living room. You think of dust in the front hall. You think of the bathroom mirror collecting a fine mist of toothpaste stars. Then you think of none of those things for one full sip. That is important too. The house settles around you. Somewhere a pipe gives a little click. The furnace wakes and sends a low breath through the floor grate. Warm air brushes your ankles and then disappears again. It feels like a brief apology from the house. You look toward the sink. Last night's dishes are mostly done and stacked. A skillet waits on the stove, with the faint, stubborn scent of bacon. The dish drainer holds 2 plates, 3 cups, and 1 fork that somehow escapes every towel. You stand and carry the mug to the counter. The cup leaves a pale ring of warmth on the table. You note it and let it be for now. The second ritual of the morning begins without fanfare. You reach for the bread box. You take down the frying pan again. The pan is cool and heavier than memory thinks it should be. Every useful object in this kitchen is slightly heavier than seems fair. Perhaps that is part of the training. You set it on the burner and turn the knob. Gas catches with a soft sound. Blue flame appears obediently. You do not yet start the bacon. That would wake the whole house by smell alone. Bacon is less a food than a public announcement. Instead, you lay out what can be laid out quietly. Plates come from the cupboard in a neat stack. Saucers follow. 2 glasses for juice stand upside down on a folded towel and shine in the thin light. You place Gerald's cereal bowl on the table and then move it 1 inch closer to his place. He always shifts it there anyway. Some marriages are built on understanding. Others are built on preemptive bowl placement. At the edge of the counter sits Gerald's lunch pail. It is metal and dull blue and dented at one corner. You open it to see yesterday's folded wax paper still inside. The wax paper has held one pickle smell all night. It is impressive how loyal certain smells are. You tear fresh pieces from the roll and smooth them flat. The paper crackles softly. That small sound belongs to school lunches, hardware stores, and every kitchen in America at once. You begin the sandwiches while the coffee stays warm. Bread first, then mustard, then cold sliced meat from the icebox. You align the slices more neatly than anyone will ever notice, because hands like to straighten things before sunrise. A lettuce leaf goes in, then another. They are a little tired at the edges. You trim those parts away with a small knife and keep going. You wrap each sandwich firmly. The wax paper folds under with tidy corners. If this were a department store window, Betty Hargrove would do it 1 shade better. Luckily, it is only Wednesday. You add an apple to the lunch pail. You wipe it on the dish towel first. The apple did not ask for polishing, but you and the apple both know appearances matter. A cookie tin waits in the cupboard. You open it with hope. Inside are 6 oatmeal cookies and 1 determined raisin, pretending to count. You place 2 cookies in the pail. Then, after half a second of reflection, you place a third. Quiet opinions about gravy are easier to hear when a third cookie is present. That is not science, but it has a science-like shape. The percolator gives another sturdy gurgle behind you. You pour a little more coffee into your cup. The second half of the first cup still counts as the first cup. This is a helpful rule. You maintain it with dignity. For a while, time remains soft at the edges. The wall clock moves, but it has not yet become personal. Minutes pass like folded towels. You can still set them down where you please. You take your cup to the sink and look out the window above it. The glass feels cool near your forehead. Across the side yard, the Hargrove's kitchen light is still off. This brings you a mean little comfort, and then a kind little shame for taking comfort in it. You forgive yourself at once. It is still dark. Dark is for small feelings. The side gate stands closed. The grass near the fence looks silver with damp. Somewhere farther down the block, a car starts and then settles into a low idle. The sound drifts and fades. No one is in a rush on your street yet. Even the mailboxes seem asleep. You rinse the knife and plate from the sandwiches. Water strikes enamel with a hollow tone. It is not loud, but it belongs firmly to the waking world. That is the problem with morning. Once you make one practical sound, the day begins to hear you. You dry your hands and reach for the kitchen calendar again. A penciled note at the corner reminds you about the butcher's special. You picture the library books waiting on the hall table. One is a cookbook you borrow with good intentions. One is a novel you keep renewing because sleep always reaches you first. Both count as self-improvement in some modest way. Your mind returns to the refrigerator and the Jell-O on its saucer. The mold sits behind the milk and beside the butter dish like a bright little promise with trust issues. You open the refrigerator door and let the cold air meet your face. Inside, everything is arranged in the democratic untidiness of ordinary life. A bowl of leftover peas sits under wax paper. The bacon grease tin waits on its side shelf. The Jell-O mold shines with serious ambition. You touch the side of the mold with one finger. It gives almost nothing away. This is not helpful, though it is very in character. You close the door and listen as the motor note steadies again. The refrigerator seems to say that patience is part of homemaking. The refrigerator says this because it does not have to iron shirts. The clock on the wall reaches 5:45. Somewhere back in the bedroom, the alarm begins its dry, metallic ringing. It sounds offended to find your side of the bed already empty. You do not hurry to it at once. That tiny rebellion is one of the few luxuries you can afford before breakfast. You let it ring exactly 3 times. Then you cross the hall and switch it off. Gerald rolls once under the blanket and opens one eye. His hair is flattened at one side. He looks less like the provider of the household and more like a boy who has misplaced a shoe. "You up already?" he says, though the evidence is difficult to ignore. You tell him the coffee is on. He gives a small sound of approval that is not yet fully language. Then he closes his eyes again for one last minute of negotiation. You leave him to it and return to the kitchen. Now the clock begins to matter. It does not change its voice. It simply becomes the supervisor. Every minute now has a place to be and a small assignment in hand. You turn the bacon on. The first strips hit the pan with a sound too happy for such an early hour. The smell follows immediately and travels down the hall with missionary zeal. There will be no more sleeping upstairs, downstairs, or in any imaginary middle floor after this. You crack eggs into a bowl and beat them with a fork. The yolks loosen slowly. The whites resist and then give up. The fork taps the bowl in a brisk rhythm. Breakfast has moved from possibility to fact. You toast bread under the broiler because the toaster still behaves like a temperamental stage actor. It works well only when watched directly and praised very little. You stand there with the oven door open a crack and keep a close eye on it. This is not suspense. This is household diplomacy. The toast browns on one side first, naturally. You turn each slice with your fingers and regret it immediately. The heat bites fast. You shake your hand once and carry on. A housewife in 1955 develops a practical relationship with minor burns. You do not welcome them. You simply stop sending formal invitations. The bacon curls and darkens at the edges. You lift it out onto a plate lined with paper. The fat stays behind in the pan with shimmering purpose. Eggs go in next. They spread softly and begin to set. You stir them with a wooden spoon and add a small pinch of salt. They gather into pale folds. Nothing about the process is exciting, and that is exactly why it steadies you. The kitchen is no longer private now, but it is still yours in another sense. You know where every spoon lives. You know which burner runs slightly hotter. You know how far to turn the tap before it squeaks. Gerald appears in the doorway, tying his robe and blinking toward the coffee pot. He is still more outline than person. His face belongs to the hour before shaving. You hand him a mug and watch him take the first drink. There is a tiny pause while he decides whether the day is manageable. The percolator has already made its case. Gerald nods once. Apparently, he agrees with it. "Smells good," he says. It is a modest sentence. It lands softly. At this hour, modest sentences are ideal. You put his eggs on a plate with bacon and toast. He sits at the table and opens the newspaper. The paper makes a broad crackling sound that fills the room with public life. You have no interest in public life at 5:52. You are interested in whether there is enough orange juice for 2 glasses and tomorrow. There is, narrowly. You pour his first and then your own. The juice is colder than the mug handle. Tiny drops of water gather at once on the outside of the glass. Gerald turns one page of the paper and lifts his eyebrows at something. He does not read it aloud. You are grateful for this. Morning news enters better in spoonfuls than in speeches. You sit for a few bites of your own breakfast while the toast is still warm. This counts as sensible housekeeping. Standing at the counter later and chewing leftovers does not count as breakfast, no matter what noon says. The eggs are soft and buttery. The toast scratches pleasantly at the roof of your mouth. The bacon is crisp at one end and softer at the other. You notice all of this because these are your first seated minutes since waking. Gerald asks what is on for supper. You tell him pot roast. The word settles him immediately. Pot roast has that effect on certain men in certain decades. He nods and says, "Not too much flour in the gravy this time." There it is. The opinion arrives as promised and very specific. It is not unkind. It is simply shaped like a note left by a committee. You say you will keep it in mind. This is true. You keep many things in mind. That is more or less the entire job. Gerald returns to his newspaper with the calm of a man who believes the matter has been professionally addressed. You take another sip of coffee and let the comment drift to the side of your thoughts. There it may sit beside grocery totals, missing clothespins, and national politics. The stack of shirts waiting for the iron passes through your mind again. One white collar peeks from the top with dangerous innocence. You already suspect the iron of treachery. It drips brown every 20 minutes, always on white fabric, like a tiny mechanical pessimist. That problem belongs to later. Later can hold it for now. You clear the plates when Gerald finishes and stands to shave. He leaves crumbs, a folded newspaper, and the faint smell of coffee behind him. These are the breadcrumbs of marriage. You rinse the dishes in hot water and stand them in the rack. Soap slips smooth over your hands. The window above the sink is now a little less dark. At last, the street begins to show itself. The trees along the sidewalk separate into trunks and branches. A bicycle lies on one front lawn, 3 houses down, where some child abandons it every single evening. The Hargroves curtains glow softly now. Then the front door across the street opens. Betty Hargrove steps out in a cardigan with a broom already in hand. Of course she does. The woman greets Dawn as if she has an appointment with it. You watch her sweep her front step in neat, deliberate strokes. She does not rush. She also does not miss a single leaf. Betty's whole property has the air of pure Pinterest before Pinterest is even a dream. You feel slightly assessed just by witnessing it through glass. Then Betty looks up, sees your kitchen light, and gives a small wave across the street. You wave back with a dish towel in one hand. The towel has a faded strawberry print and one stubborn stain. This feels accurate. Betty returns indoors. Her step is now immaculate. You feel no resentment, only a mild desire to borrow her secret and perhaps one measuring cup of her confidence. Behind you, the percolator makes a slower sound as it winds down. Its work is nearly done. Yours is only changing shape. Gerald calls from the bathroom that he cannot find a clean handkerchief. You close your eyes for half a second. Then you open the hall closet and pull one from the top shelf, where he himself places them every Saturday and forgets by Wednesday. Marriage is also this. You bring it to him without commentary. He takes it with a distracted thank you. Peace in the morning is often made of withheld speeches. By the time he dresses, the sky has turned from black to a washed gray blue. The edges of things look firmer. The house is fully awake now and making no attempt to hide it. You straighten cushions in the living room on your way back from the bedroom. It takes 6 seconds. The room looks 10% more composed. That is a very good return on investment. In the bathroom mirror, you catch your own face and pause. Your scarf sits crooked over your hair. One cheek has a pillow crease still printed on it. You smooth the crease with cool fingertips. It does not care. Some marks must fade on their own. Back in the kitchen, you tie a cleaner apron over your robe. The apron strings cross behind you and knot at the front. Once the apron is on, the day feels officially hired. You wipe the table, fold the newspaper, and tuck Gerald's lunch pail beside the door. The wall clock moves to 6:18. It is amazing how much has already happened before some people even begin dreaming of toast. You pour the last good hot coffee from the percolator into your cup and stand at the sink again. The second private part of the morning is smaller, but it still exists. You drink while looking out over the street. The milk bottles 2 houses down wait in their wire carrier. A dog farther along the block pulls once at its leash and then gives up. A curtain lifts in Mrs. Kowalski's kitchen next door. You know better than to look directly at once. Mrs. Kowalski has a gift for appearing exactly when something has gone slightly wrong. Observation seems to be her preferred hobby. So you keep your eyes on the sink and only glance sideways. There she is at her kitchen window, already dressed, already upright, already witnessing existence. She does not wave. She nods once through the glass and disappears. Nothing is on fire. Nothing has spilled. Still, being seen by Mrs. Kowalski always gives the room a brief feeling of inspection. You murmur good morning to no one in particular and finish your coffee. Gerald comes out at last with his tie straight and his hat in hand. The hat sits slightly crooked even before he puts it on. Some things are preordained. He takes his lunch pail and pats his coat pockets for wallet, keys, and cigarettes. The order never changes. If one item is missing, the whole departure wobbles. Today, all three are present. At the door, he turns back and asks if you need anything from town. You say you are going to the A&P later. He nods, as if this confirms an important principle of suburban civilization. Then, he steps out into the gray morning and closes the door behind him with a gentle click. You stand still for a moment after he leaves. The house listens to itself again. The silence is different now. It is not the private silence from before dawn. It is the working silence of the day after the first wave has passed. One crumb of toast remains near Gerald's place. You pick it up with your fingertip and carry it to the sink. Even the smallest things want clearing away. The wall clock goes on ticking. The ironing pile goes on waiting. Somewhere in the refrigerator, the Jell-O continues either setting or refusing to set, which is really just a matter of personality. And with the coffee cups draining in the rack, and the street finally bright enough to show Betty's perfect front step in full, you turn back to the kitchen counter and begin again. The kitchen clock is the first thing you trust this morning. Its round face hangs above the doorway with a steady little tick. The red second hand moves with the confidence of someone who never has to wash a pan. You look at it before you look out the window. At 7:15, breakfast must be on the table. That time is not a suggestion. You work around it the way you work around rain. You know exactly what 5 lost minutes do to a house. They flatten the eggs. They chill the toast. They turn one missing mitten into a family event. They also make Gerald look at his watch in a quiet way. So you stand at the cool Formica counter and begin by touch as much as sight. The surface feels smooth and faintly cold under your fingertips. The smell in the room is dish soap, yesterday's bacon grease, and the first warm hint of coffee. In the kitchen corner, the refrigerator hums its one long note. It sounds patient and slightly smug. It has only one job this morning, and it is doing it without any folding. The percolator makes a brisk, tidy gurgle on the stove. That is good news. A confident percolator means the day may still obey simple rules. A slow drip would mean hidden laundry and weak Jell-O destiny. You move in the order that works. You do not invent a better order. The stove has taught you this already, and the stove is rarely sentimental. First, the bacon goes into the black skillet. The strips lie pale and flat for one quiet moment. Then they begin to tighten and darken at the edges. The smell arrives fast and fills the room before anyone else does. It is salty and warm and certain. It tells the house that morning is no longer negotiable. You turn the slices with a fork, one by one. The grease gathers in the low places of the pan and shines. Tiny pops touch your wrist if you stand too close, which you do anyway. The toaster waits beside the bread box like a machine with only 2 moods. It is either early or late. It is never exactly where you want it in the dance. You set out 4 plates in a row. You place the butter dish near the toast rack. You put jelly on the table, though no one uses much, because a breakfast table looks unfinished without a small red promise. The lunch pails sit near the sink, where you lined them up last night. One has a bent latch that behaves better if spoken to softly. You do not say this aloud, because the children would remember it forever. At 7:03, you crack the kitchen window a few inches. Cool air slips in over the sink. Across the street, Betty Hargrove's curtains are already open, which feels less like a fact and more like a verdict. You do not actually see Betty yet. You only see the idea of Betty. Her kitchen looks as neat as a photograph in a magazine. the kind that seems to ask if your floor has considered trying harder. Her kitchen is pure Pinterest, if Pinterest arrives by station wagon and never admits to being tired. Somewhere in that house, a perfect ring of Jell-O is almost certainly setting itself with moral superiority. You let the curtain fall back. The bacon is ready before the eggs should begin. This matters. Bacon can wait under a folded towel on a plate. Eggs become offended if you ask them to wait for anyone. You lift the bacon out and set it on brown paper. The paper darkens in little islands. You save the grease in an old tin because that is what kitchens do, even when nobody explains why the tin grows heavier every week. Now the pan is hot and ready. You lower the flame. You crack in the eggs with a quick hand and watch the whites turn from clear to clouded. This is the part that asks for attention without drama. The edges turn lacy first. The centers stay bright and soft, each yolk holding its own small sun. You reach back with one hand and push down the first slices of bread. Toast belongs near the end, but not at the end. If you leave toast for last, you spend breakfast apologizing to bread. By 7:08, the children's shoes should be on. By 7:10, school bags should be found. By 7:12, everyone should be at least pretending to understand that time exists. You hear feet in the hall before you see faces. The sound is soft and uneven on the polished floor. One pair drags for 3 steps, then remembers purpose. You call them in with the same calm voice you use every weekday. You do not raise it. Raised voices make toast anxious and make everyone touch the wrong thing. 2 small faces appear in the kitchen doorway, with morning hair and serious expressions. One has a collar folded inward. The other is carrying a pencil for reasons known only to childhood. You smooth one collar as they pass. You take the pencil and place it on the counter. You remind them that pencils do not improve the taste of eggs. They climb into their chairs with the solemnity of people arriving at a meeting they did not schedule. Lunch pails wait by the door. School bags lean against the wall like tired little soldiers, though much less dramatic and with more crayons. You place bacon first, then eggs, then toast. The order is not artistic. It is practical and born from many small regrets. The toast pops up one shade darker than you hope. It is still acceptable. In a 1950s kitchen, acceptable is a thriving category. You butter each slice while it is hot enough to listen. The butter softens at once and slides into the grain. A little dathers along the edges, which is the sort of luxury nobody writes about in household guides. Milk goes into thick glasses from the refrigerator. Orange juice waits at a squat pitcher with a chill around its middle. One child asks for sugar on grapefruit, and you allow it with the expression of a public servant signing a permit. At 7:15, breakfast is on the table, exactly as promised. This gives the room a brief and tidy peace. Even the clock seems pleased with itself. The trouble with a precise breakfast is that everyone notices when precision slips. At 7:20, there's still calm. At 7:25, a missing mitten becomes an idea. At 7:30, that idea begins to own furniture. So you watch the minutes while you eat in small standing pauses. You take sips of coffee between crossings from stove to table. You sit only once, and even then, only on the front edge of the chair. Gerald comes in with his tie already straight, and his hat still in his hand. He smells of shaving soap and the cold air from the bedroom window. He sits down as though he has joined a train already in motion. You set his coffee by his right hand, because that is where it belongs. You place his eggs with the yolks unbroken, because that is how he likes them. Marriage at breakfast is often a matter of tiny naps. He thanks you in the low voice that belongs to early hours. Then he glances at the gravy boat drying by the sink. Last Tuesday has apparently not left him entirely. He says he thinks the toast is just right today. He says, yesterday's napkins felt especially crisp. This is praise in the local dialect, and you receive it as such. A moment later, he adds that the bacon is perhaps a shade more done than Sundays, though very good. There it is. At 7:18, Gerald offers one quiet opinion about something specific, and the day officially takes its shape. You nod as if discussing weather with a man who lives permanently at your table. You know what he means. You also know that tomorrow the bacon will still be bacon, and he will still have thoughts. The children eat in bursts and pauses. One takes 3 quick bites, then stares at the cereal box prize offer. The other carefully builds a wall of crusts that would not stop anything larger than a worried ant. You remind them to drink their milk. You remind them again with less poetry. Glasses tilt. The milk line drops. A mitten is already missing, though the weather is only cool. Mittens in this house behave like traveling salesmen. They appear on stairs, in coat pockets, and once, in the bread drawer. You wipe one chin with a damp cloth. You fold one napkin back onto one lap. You retrieve a spoon from under the table before it becomes a morning story. Gerald eats steadily and looks once at the clock. Not because he doubts you, because the clock is the true head of the household until 7:42. His departure ritual never changes much. That is part of its comfort. A man leaving for work in 1955 carries his habits like pocket change. He finishes his coffee. He folds his newspaper to the inside page he means to read later and never quite does. He pats his pockets in a sequence so familiar you could conduct it with a baton. Wallet first, then keys, then handkerchief, then the brief touch at the hat brim, as if the hat itself needs reassurance. You collect plates as he rises. You scrape crusts into the bin and set cups by the sink. The water runs hot and quick, but only for a moment, because this is still breakfast, and not yet dishes. From the driveway comes the first distant cough of a car turning over somewhere down the street. Another engine answers from farther off. Suburbia begins each weekday with this soft mechanical clearing of throats. One child remembers a library book at exactly the wrong minute. The other remembers needing mittens at exactly the same minute. You do not call this disaster, because that would give it ideas. Instead, you move with the plain speed of practice. The library book is under the sofa cushion, where it has apparently been studying upholstery. One mitten is in the coat pocket. The second is behind the radiator, warm and unapologetic. At 7:26, a 5-minute slip would still be recoverable. At 7:31, it would become sticky. At 7:36, everyone would leave, carrying toast and private regret. So you keep the line moving. Coats go on while mouths finish chewing. School bags are lifted before questions can form. Buttons are fastened with hands that still smell faintly of bacon and soap. A scarf is crossed under one chin and tucked through itself. A shoelace is tied twice, because one child ties with hope instead of knots. On the kitchen table sits a women's magazine you have not opened yet. Its bright cover promises easier suppers, lovelier linens, and a quiz about whether your husband feels truly appreciated. It is essentially a lifestyle influencer printed on paper, and it has the same serene nerve. You glance at it only long enough to feel briefly assessed. Then you turn back to real life, which at this moment needs 1 lunch pail and 2 permission slips. The lunch pails go into small waiting hands. One is red and one is blue, though both now share the same gray smudges near the clasp. They carry sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, an apple, and cookies that are not discussed before noon. You check the contents by memory more than sight. Peanut butter for one, ham for the other. Napkins folded square, and names written where names ought to be. Gerald stands by the door and puts on his jacket. He pulls each cuff straight with a small hard tug. That gesture always makes him look ready for an office, a train platform, and a photograph. He settles his hat on his head, with the brim slightly crooked. It leans just enough to suggest personality without actual risk. You have seen that angle every workday for years, and still it feels newly precise. He reaches for his briefcase and pauses. His eye falls on the sugar bowl. He says in the same mild tone that the spoon seems to wander each morning and might prefer the left side. You look at the spoon. The spoon looks innocent. You tell him you will inform it of his preference. That is the other small opinion before departure. It lands softly and joins the first one about bacon. The house absorbs both without complaint, like a rug taking in footsteps. The children are now fully vertical and almost pointed toward the door. This is the narrow, useful window when they still remember their own names and have not yet thought of one more urgent thing. You stoop to zip one coat to the chin. You turn one coat right side out because it has somehow been put on upside down in spirit, if not in law. You press hats down over ears that are not interested. Outside, the morning sits pale and cool over the street. The lawns are wet enough to darken at the edges. Betty Hargrove's grass is, of course, greener than yours by a rude but measurable amount. Her front walk already looks swept. Her curtains are set at exactly the angle that says cheerful competence. You suspect she has never once chased a mitten behind a radiator. At that very thought, Mrs. Kowalski appears at the side gate as if called by a minor household flaw. She does not enter. She simply stands in her sensible coat and witnesses you balancing a lunch pail, a mitten, and your dignity. She nods once toward the children. Then she nods once toward the sky, as if confirming that weather continues. Then she withdraws with the calm efficiency of a woman who has seen enough. You almost laugh, but the time does not permit a full laugh. It permits only a small breath through the nose. That is still enough to lighten the room. By 7:38, everyone is assembled near the door in a cluster of fabric and leather and brushed hair. The hallway smells faintly of cold air, shoe polish, and the last warm drift from the kitchen. You hand Gerald his lunch. You hand one child a forgotten spelling paper. You hand the other child a mitten that tries to escape again before making contact. No arguments arrive, which is its own kind of blessing. There are requests and reminders, and one question about whether Friday is really 3 days away. But no one digs in their heels, and no one cries over toast. The front door opens with its usual stiff little drag at the threshold. Morning light comes in flat and clean. For a second, the whole house seems to lean toward the outside. Gerald steps out first with his briefcase and his crooked hat. The children follow in a rustle of coats and lunch pails. Shoes tap the porch, and then the path. At 7:42, the sequence completes itself. Gerald turns once to say he will be home at 5:40. He adds that he may prefer peas tonight, if the market has good ones. You say you will see what looks fresh. This is both an answer and a promise to later you. Later you will be in the produce aisle, comparing peas with the grave concentration of a jeweler. Then the door closes. The latch catches with a small, clear sound. Footsteps fade down the walk. An engine starts somewhere. The silence that follows is sudden and total enough to feel upholstered. A minute ago, the house is all forks, buttons, reminders, and moving coats. Now it is only the refrigerator's long hum and the clock continuing its private work. You stand with one hand still on the doorknob. The metal is cool now. The hallway looks wider than it did 30 seconds earlier. This is the daily vanishing act. 4 places at the table become 1 place standing by the sink. 4 voices become a room full of ordinary objects waiting to be put right. You walk back into the kitchen slowly, because now there is no need to move fast. The coffee in your cup is warm instead of hot. A crust sits alone on 1 plate, like a small defeated raft. The table shows the whole breakfast in traces. Butter marks soften on a knife. Egg yolk has dried in a bright yellow crescent on 1 plate. 1 chair is pushed back farther than the others, which must belong to the child who never dismounts quietly. The bacon smell lingers in the curtains and in your apron. The dish towel is damp at 1 corner. The sink holds exactly enough dishes to suggest a life, but not yet enough to call a burden. You take your cup and sit down properly at last. The chair gives a small wooden sound under your weight. You look once more at the clock and feel the strange pleasure of having met it on time. Outside, the street resumes its weekday innocence. A dog barks twice and then thinks better of it. A delivery truck passes at the far end of the block without hurrying. Across the street, Betty's front door opens and closes with flawless timing. Of course it does. Somewhere inside her shining kitchen, a breakfast has also vanished on schedule, probably without a single crumb staging a protest. You let her have that. The percolator gives one last satisfied burble on the stove. It sounds almost congratulatory, which is more support than some household guides ever offer. You rise to pour the final cup before the dishes begin their quiet campaign. For 1 small minute, the whole ranch house belongs only to your breathing and the tick above the doorway. It is not lonely. It is simply clear. Then you fold your napkin, turn toward the sink, and begin the next part of the day. At 8 o'clock, the ironing board opens in the living room with a metal click and a tired sigh. You set its feet on the braided rug between the sofa and the front window. You choose that spot for the light. You choose it for the radio too. The board comes from the hall closet with old umbrellas and one lonely overshoe. One leg catches the rug fringe. You give it a small tug and pretend this is not the board's daily opinion. From the kitchen corner, the refrigerator keeps humming its one long note. The air still holds faint dish soap and yesterday's bacon grease. The house smells awake, but not especially eager. On the drain board, the chrome percolator offers one slow and doubtful drip. It sounds like a forecast. You know at once the ironing pile will be taller than memory allows. You carry the iron in both hands like a dense family truth. Its cord trails behind you across the floor. The plug reaches the wall by an inch that feels personal. The board cover is thin at the center from years of heat. A pale singe mark blooms there in a shape that could almost be Ohio. You smooth the cloth anyway. You bring the basket from the back bedroom and place it by your left ankle. The basket is full of flatwork, shirts, and things that should have been done yesterday. Yesterday had its own firm ideas. You sort by the only system that makes sense to you. White shirts first, then the blouses that need a careful hand, then pillowcases, aprons, and tea towels who can endure a little less dignity. Gerald's office shirts sit on top like a committee with minutes to approve. Best white shirt first, then second best, then the one with the collar beginning to soften. You press the white things before the iron grows moody. That is the rule. You do not write the rule down because the rule lives in your shoulders. You set the bottle of starch on the side table beside a stack of magazines. The women smiling from the covers promise cheerful efficiency and very advanced casseroles. The magazine is a lifestyle influencer in paper form with fewer apologies. The first shirt goes over the narrow end of the board. You pull the fabric smooth with your fingertips. The cotton feels cool, crisp, and faintly damp from the wash. When the iron meets the sleeve, it answers with a long, soft hiss. Steam rises and touches your face. The smell is part hot metal and part clean cloth, with a whisper of starch. You begin with the collar because collars look people in the eye. Then you move to cuffs, because cuffs always wander into gravy. After that, you do the sleeves, the shoulders, and the broad calm of the back. The iron is heavy enough to make you respect your own forearm. You guide it forward in straight, patient lines. You lift, return, and guide again. There is a rhythm to it that asks for no cleverness. Pull the cloth flat. Press. Turn. Smooth. Press again until the wrinkles give up their little arguments. The radio comes alive beside you in a fog of static and brass. A man announces the weather in a voice that sounds pressed itself. Then a woman begins a household segment with bright and fearless confidence. She tells you to air feather pillows on dry days. She tells you to save soap scraps in a jar. She tells you to rest your feet every hour, which is useful advice in the same way umbrellas are useful after rain. You smile at the radio without looking up. The shirt under your hands asks for more attention than any broadcaster. You press the placket until it lies as flat as a promise. Outside the front window, the street is already busy with ordinary virtue. A milk truck passes slow and clinking. A dog trots by with great purpose and no visible errand. Across the street, Betty Hargrove is shaking out a small rug on her porch. Even from here, her kitchen looks spotless through the screen door. Betty's whole house has that pure Pinterest look, years before anyone thinks to name it. You imagine Betty's ironing basket contains 6 agreeable items and 1 folded napkin. Yours contains weather systems. You give the first shirt a final pass and hang it from the curtain rod. The second shirt goes on the board while the iron is still well behaved. This one is not the best shirt. This one is the second best shirt, which means it matters almost as much and complains twice as much. Its collar points have a hint of curl that no amount of pressing fully corrects. One cuff button is newer than the other. The left pocket has the faint square memory of a pen. You spray a little starch along the front and smooth it in. The starch smells sharp and hopeful. It gives the cloth a confidence it did not naturally possess. The radio woman has moved on to floor wax and guest towels. She says a tidy home reflects a tidy mind. You look at the basket by your foot and decide your mind is rich and layered. The iron glides down the sleeve with a sound like paper being folded very slowly. It is satisfying in a deep and modest way. Wrinkles vanish without applause. You turn the shirt and fit one shoulder over the pointed end of the board. This takes a small wrestle each time. Shirt yokes are cut by men who never once had to press them. The heat works into your palm through the fabric. Your thumb learns every seam by touch. You feel the tiny ridge where the collar band meets the neck. The room begins to narrow to useful things. Cloth, steam, the board edge against your hip. The radio chattering as if it can help. A sponsor interrupts to praise a soap powder in very sincere tones. Then the same cheerful woman returns and suggests ironing dark fabrics inside out. You had already planned to do exactly that, which gives you a tiny and private superiority. You move from the sleeve to the front panel. You smooth around the pocket. You press near the second button. You begin to think this shirt may leave the room with honor after all. Then the iron gives its warning. It does not hiss wrong at first. It only grows quiet for half a breath. You lift it slightly, and from its nose falls one slow brown drop. The drop lands just below the pocket on the white cotton. It blooms there like weak tea. It is not large, but it is undeniable. You close your eyes for a moment that is almost prayer and mostly calculation. The iron has done this before. The iron remembers every white shirt in the house and holds a particular grudge against Gerald's. You set the iron upright and very still. You stare at the mark. The mark stares back with complete confidence. From somewhere near the side gate comes the soft squeak of a hinge. You do not need to turn your head to know Mrs. Kowalski has arrived at the exact historical second. She witnesses. She nods once. She withdraws. You carry the shirt to the bathroom sink because the kitchen sink holds breakfast things. Cold water runs over your knuckles. You dab the spot with a clean washcloth and a square of white soap. The brown lightens to a pale tan shadow. This is not victory, but it is movement. You rinse again and press the cloth between two towels with both hands. Back at the board, you inspect the damage in the window light. The mark sits low on the front panel. It is below the line of the jacket. It is also above the line where a tucked hem becomes nobody's business. You think of Gerald leaving at 7:42 with his hat slightly crooked and his opinions neatly folded. He will return at 5:40 with another opinion, likely about something very specific and almost invisible. You prefer not to offer the shirt as a conversation starter. So you begin the strategy. You iron the area again with a press cloth between iron and shirt. You sharpen the crease at the sleeve. You set the collar especially well. You make every other feature so crisp the eye is gently led elsewhere. Then you choose the tie. A dark tie with a broad blade will fall just enough off-center under his jacket. It will not cover the spot completely. It will, however, suggest a busier landscape. You are, in a modest way, doing camouflage. You hang the second-best shirt behind the better blue one. Tomorrow may become a blue shirt day through natural household evolution. History is full of such quiet revisions. The iron waits on its heel, innocent as a lamp. You wipe its sole plate with a rag while it is still warm. A small brown line comes away like evidence. You refill the reservoir only halfway this time. Full reservoirs encourage drama. The iron responds to moderation about as well as any member of the household, which is to say imperfectly. The next shirt is striped and therefore less vulnerable to tragedy. You press it with relief. Stripes forgive much and reveal little. By now the living room has taken on that warm cloth smell of steady work. It mixes with radio static and dust warmed by the window. The house feels occupied in a useful, almost humming way. Your feet settle into their places on the rug and stay there too long. One heel presses a shape into the braid. The other foot shifts every few minutes and finds no entirely happy answer. The ironing board is the 1950s standing desk. It asks your back for loyalty, engages every part of your arms, and still leaves you feeling slightly behind by 10 o'clock. You do not need a pamphlet to tell you this. You keep going because stopping halfway creates a new category of work. Half-done ironing is worse than unironed laundry. Unironed laundry at least knows what it is. A pillowcase comes next and feels like a vacation after shirts. You fold it once and press the edge flat, then the other edge, then the broad white middle with easy, generous strokes. 2 more pillowcases follow with almost no complaint. They smell faintly of sunshine from the line and faintly of indoor steam now. You stack them on the sofa arm in a crisp white pile. The radio changes to a mid-morning music program. A singer croons about moonlight at an hour when you are mostly thinking about sleeve pockets. The announcer slips in a tip about keeping lemon halves for your garbage pail. You consider your own garbage pail and decide it has earned no lemon today. It will receive coffee grounds and potato peels with the stoicism of its kind. Every system in the house has a role. You tackle one of your blouses next because it has puffed sleeves and cannot be ignored longer. The fabric is softer than Gerald's shirts and more inclined to shifting. It slides away whenever you look too sure of yourself. You press around the buttons carefully so the iron does not catch. The pearl finish on each one feels cool under your fingertips. One thread at the cuff looks loose, but not loose enough for immediate panic. Outside, a lawnmower starts somewhere down the street and drones on steadily. The neighbor's grass is already somehow greener than yours. This remains true in every season and under several administrations. The blouse takes longer than it should because curved seams never believe in cooperation. You work around the gathers one small section at a time. The steam rises in little puffs against your wrist. A commercial comes on for canned fruit cocktail. Then a tidy-voiced woman advises listeners to plan meals around the week's specials. You wonder if she also has an iron that leaks brown only on white cotton, or if Providence favors her. You are not angry with the iron exactly. Angry is too much effort for a household object. You are watchful, which in this house counts as a mature and seasoned affection. The basket slowly lowers. This is encouraging. The stack of finished things on the chair slowly rises. This is even better, because rising stacks look more persuasive than shrinking ones. You press Gerald's handkerchiefs in pairs and fold them into neat squares. Their corners must meet. Their plainness asks for accuracy. A tea towel follows with a blue stripe near both ends. You iron right over the stripe without fear. Tea towels have the resilient dignity of veteran employees. After a while, your shoulders begin to speak in a language of dull heat. The back of your neck grows damp under your hair. Your fingers know the iron handle so well they seem shaped around it. You glance at the clock above the mantel and find that only 47 minutes have passed. Time near an ironing board behaves differently from ordinary time. It stretches politely and then refuses further explanation. You continue because the board is already up and the iron is already hot. Half the battle in housework is not momentum. Half the battle is refusing to think too hard. Another shirt reaches the board, though you do not remember lifting it from the basket. Work sometimes does that. Your hands move ahead while your mind wanders 2 rooms over. You think briefly of the grocery list waiting by the telephone. You think of butter, flour, and a can of pineapple. The A&P is basically Amazon Prime, except your delivery window depends on your own legs and a man named Carl. The radio woman returns once more with house-cleaning advice that sounds almost personal. She recommends sitting down for a few minutes before fatigue becomes crossness. You look at the armchair and feel seen. You finish the shirt in front of you before granting the idea too much power. One more collar, one more cuff, one last broad pass across the back. Then you set the iron upright and step away from the board. The armchair takes you in with suspicious ease. The springs give a soft complaint under your weight. Your knees stop holding you up and seem grateful in a quiet, nearly tender way. You tell yourself this is a brief pause. You tell yourself it lasts only long enough for the next song. The radio agrees with a mellow trumpet and no objections at all. Sunlight lies across the carpet in a bright slant from the front window. Dust moves in it without hurry. The finished pillowcases on the sofa arm look almost formal in their little stack. For 4 minutes, you do nothing that can be measured. You do not fold, you do not sort, you do not improve a surface or consult a list. You simply sit and feel the air cooling the damp place at your neck. You feel your feet pulse faintly inside your shoes. You hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen and the lawnmower far away. It is not sleep. It is not laziness. It is a stillness so small it could fit in a teacup, and yet it restores whole counties of your back. Then the iron gives a faint tick from the board as it cools and remembers itself. Duty has a very recognizable sound. You rise before the chair can make a stronger argument. Back at the board, the cloth under your palm feels rougher than before. Work after a pause always does. You smooth it once and begin again. The last of Gerald's shirts receive their due in a quieter mood. You take less starch now. You trust sharp pressing more than extra optimism. You do cuffs by habit and collars by memory. The sleeves pass under the iron in long, pale ribbons. The shirt fronts lie down one after another, as if they have accepted terms. No more brown drips arrive. This feels less like safety than like suspense concluded by boredom. The iron has apparently made its point and gone mild. You finish the softened collar shirt last and decide it belongs under a sweater on Saturday. This is not surrender. It is wardrobe planning with compassionate realism. By a little past 10, only aprons and tea towels remain in the basket. These are friendly work. They ask for firmness and not much delicacy. You press your own apron ties flat and smooth the bib with quick strokes. A faint flower shadow near the pocket stays where it is. Some marks are not stains so much as job descriptions. The tea towels go fast. Blue stripe, red stripe, plain white with a frayed hem. Each one yields with a hiss and a breath of steam. You stack the finished things by type, because future you deserves that kindness. Shirts on hangers, pillowcases folded together, towels in one clean pile, handkerchiefs squared like sensible little letters. The living room now looks half parlor and half pressing shop. A row of shirts hangs from door frames and chair backs to cool. The sight is oddly cheerful, like flags for a very domestic nation. You switch off the iron and unplug it from the wall. The cord drops with a soft snake-like curve to the floor. Silence enters the handle where heat had been. The board stays up another minute while the metal cools. You rest both hands on its edge and lean there a little. The house seems to exhale with you. There is no fanfare for finishing this sort of work. No one appears with flowers because the pillowcases are crisp. No band strikes up because the second-best shirt has been tactically reassigned. Still, the room is fuller of order than it was at 8. The basket is lighter, the chair is neater. Your own mind feels pressed flatter in the best possible way. Across the street, Betty Hargrove steps out again and clips something white to her clothesline. It hangs there in one perfect, obedient shape. You nod toward her porch with the weary respect due to a worthy rival. If she glances over now, she sees you lifting the board from the rug with 2 practiced hands. She sees the line of fresh shirts. She sees at least enough evidence to know you have not entirely lost the morning. You fold the board and guide it back toward the hall closet. One leg tries to swing open at the last second. Of course it does. You tuck the iron on its shelf with the caution usually reserved for moody relatives. It will behave again until it does not. You both understand the arrangement. When you return to the living room, the radio is still playing softly to the empty board space. The warm smell of cotton lingers. Your feet ache. The work is done anyway. You gather the shirts from their temporary places and carry them to the bedroom, one careful armful at a time. The second best shirt goes toward the back with strategic innocence. The blue shirt moves forward to meet tomorrow. Then you stand for a moment in the doorway and listen to the house. The refrigerator hums. The street murmurs. Somewhere a screen door taps shut. The morning has not become glamorous. The iron has not learned remorse. Gerald's shirts remain Gerald's shirts. Yet the collars are smooth, the cuffs are sharp, and the day continues in orderly little rows. The pencil rests beside the sugar bowl, as though it has been waiting for this exact small duty. You sit at the kitchen table with one hip against the chair edge. The formica feels cool under your forearm. The refrigerator hums its one long note in the corner. The room still holds a faint mix of dish soap and yesterday's bacon grease. You pull the grocery money from the small tin in the drawer. You smooth the bills flat with your palm. You count them twice, not because the sum changes, but because the day feels steadier when the numbers line up. The list goes on the back of an envelope from the gas company. A proper list never begins with what you want most. It begins with what the store shows you first. That is one of the unwritten rules, and it saves your feet. You write in a narrow column with a short pencil. Lettuce goes near the top. Coffee sits lower down. Soap flakes stay near the end, because nobody wants their apples smelling ready for laundry. You do not write the list by appetite alone. You write it by aisle order, bag weight, and the useful geography of your own cupboards. You also write it by memory, which is less noble than it sounds, and mostly means opening doors and peering in. You check the pantry with the list folded in your fingers. There are 2 cans of tomatoes, 1 can of peaches, and a lonely packet of gelatin leaning against the flour tin. The potatoes have reached that soft, thoughtful age when they begin considering sprouts. The flour canister is still respectable when you lift it. The sugar bin is lower than you hoped. The coffee tin gives a hollow little sound that means nobody should dawdle. You open the bread box and find half a loaf. You decide that counts as almost none. Crumbs cling to the enamel tray, and you swipe them into your palm with the side of your hand. The pot roast takes up more space in your mind than it should. It is only dinner, and yet it sits there like a committee meeting. And the weather has that cool middle-season feel that asks for onions and gravy. You think of pork chops for one sensible minute. Then you think of Gerald's quiet opinion about dry meat from last Tuesday. The roast returns to first place without saying a word. A pot roast means carrots, onions, and potatoes that still behave like potatoes. It means celery if the stalks look crisp enough. It means one good cut of beef that can fill the house with that steady, useful smell by late afternoon. You write roast in the middle of the page and circle it once. The circle is not dramatic. It is simply a reminder that the whole list orbits this one choice. There are more rules than anyone admits. You do not put eggs near canned goods. You do not forget coffee, unless you enjoy living dangerously. You do not buy peaches because a label smiles at you. You add paper napkins because the last stack looks thin. You add brown sugar because a cake later in the week sounds like a good idea for your future self. Future you often benefits from present you standing in sensible shoes. The women's magazine lies open beside the salt shaker. It offers a menu for a luncheon involving watercress, 6 olives, and a confidence your grocery store has never stocked. It is basically a lifestyle influencer in printed form, though with more hats and less honesty about prep time. You ignore the watercress and write radishes instead. Radishes know their place. They arrive crunchy, bright, and without any social ambition. You check the icebox one last time. Butter is low, milk is nearly gone. The pickle jar contains enough liquid to suggest abundance and enough pickles to prove otherwise. The list now has its proper shape. Produce first, meat next, then canned goods, baking things, coffee, soap, and the cold items last. If you write it any other way, you spend the trip circling aisles like a confused moth in a house dress. You fold the envelope in half and tuck it into your handbag. The clasp snaps shut with a tidy sound. The sound feels approving, which is generous of a handbag. At the sink, you rinse your hands and dry them on the towel hanging from the oven door. The chrome percolator on the drain board gives a modest, even gurgle. That means the day is manageable, or at least willing to pretend. You glance out the window over the sink. Across the street, Betty Hargrove's curtains hang with calm, exact pleats. Her lawn is already greener than yours in the same way some people are mysteriously more rested than everybody else. You tie a scarf over your hair and settle it behind your ears. You check for your house key, your wallet, and the list. A trip to the A&P asks for no heroics, but it does like a little order. The front door closes behind you with a soft wooden click. The porch still holds the morning warmth in its boards. The street looks settled and ordinary, with cars parked at angles that suggest men have left for offices and will return by supper. You walk along the sidewalk with your handbag tucked close. The maple trees throw broken pieces of shade over the concrete. Somewhere a radio drifts from an open window, low and tinny, with a singer sounding cheerful about things that do not involve grocery budgets. The A&P is near enough to walk when the weather behaves. Your shoes make a steady sound against the pavement. You pass clipped hedges, damp driveways, and one tricycle lying on its side like a tiny failed parade. Mrs. Kowalski appears at her side gate just as you reach the corner. She is holding a clothespin bag and wearing the look of someone who notices weather, hemlines, and produce quality without any wasted motion. She nods once at your handbag and once at your shoes. You nod back with the calm of a woman carrying an excellent list. This is mostly true. It feels important that it be mostly true. At the edge of the shopping strip, the blacktop parking lot gives off a faint, warm smell. Cars stand in rows with enough room for doors, babies, and pride. The lot has its own quiet manners, and everyone seems to know them without being taught. You never cut behind a backing car, even if the driver is waving vaguely. You never drift down the middle while studying your list. You move with purpose along the painted edge and let the automobiles conduct their slow suburban ballet without your ankles in the cast. A man in shirt sleeves lifts a box of oranges near the side entrance. A woman with curlers hidden under a scarf pauses to adjust 2 paper sacks on her hip. Another woman waits for her child to finish staring at the gumball machine as if it contains the future. The front doors breathe cool store air toward you. One door is marked Enter. Though some people treat this as a suggestion, you use the proper side because the proper side exists for a reason, and because collisions before noon are bad for the spirit. Inside, the floor smells faintly of wax and wet produce. The overhead lights turn every can into a small upright promise. A metal cart nestles inside another cart near the entrance, each with a wheel that may or may not share your long-term goals. You test one cart with a cautious push. It pulls hard to the left like a stubborn uncle with opinions about tomatoes. You trade it for another, which rattles but moves straight, and in grocery matters that counts as luxury. The A&P is essentially Amazon Prime, except the delivery window is whenever your own legs carry you there. The recommendation algorithm is a man named Carl who has never cooked anything. There is also no returns policy on the pot roast. You unfold your list and place it against the cart handle. The order on the page now proves its worth at once. Lettuce waits to your right, apples farther down, and you feel the mild, deep joy of having arranged your future to save 6 unnecessary steps. You begin in produce because produce bruises, wilts, and takes offense if left too long. The lettuce sits in stacked green heads with beads of cool water in the folds. You lift 2 before choosing the heavier one. 3 apples go into a paper bag, then a 4th because 3 looks lonely. You press each one with your thumb and avoid any with soft spots hiding under a polished shine. Grocery shopping contains more detective work than most official jobs. The carrots are bunched with their tops still on. You choose a bundle with straight roots and damp leaves. The celery gets a careful look because stringy celery can ruin a roast by merely existing nearby. You add onions and then stand still for a breath. You are not lost. You are simply matching the cart to the list and the dinner to the day, which requires a thoughtful pause that would be respected more if it happened in an office. At the end of produce, you take a small square of waxed paper and wrap your parsley. The paper crackles softly in your hands. Little store sounds like that can make an errand feel almost ceremonial. You do not linger at the magazine rack near the aisle turn. If you stop too long, you leave with 1 extra publication and no better understanding of yourself. A woman nearby flips through a movie magazine anyway, which is between her and her budget. The canned goods aisle gives back a neat echo when wheels pass. Labels line up like patient soldiers, without any of the troublesome parts. You place tomatoes, peaches, and green beans in the cart with care, keeping the heavy tins low and centered. The list has another rule that never gets spoken aloud. You buy staples before luxuries, because staples do not flatter you and luxuries absolutely do. The cookies in the bright package are already trying to make eye contact. You hold firm and reach for coffee instead. The coffee tin lands in the cart with a serious metal weight. Few objects in the house inspire more relief when restocked. Brown sugar comes next, then flour, then soap flakes in their tall paper box. You place the soap with a little distance from the produce, because no apple deserves to taste faintly of wash day. The world offers enough confusion without scented fruit. By now, the roast has started pulling you forward. You can feel the butcher counter waiting at the far end of the store. It has the particular gravity of a place where dinner becomes official. The air grows cooler near the meat case. White paper parcels sit in rows behind the glass, all folded and tied with a precision that suggests either art or very strong habits. A little bell rings somewhere. As a clerk opens a back door, you join the short line before the counter and set both hands on the cart handle. This is not idle waiting. This is the quiet part of the ritual, where you decide exactly how to ask for what you mean. A pot roast cannot be requested with vague hopefulness. You need a cut with enough fat to keep company with the vegetables. You need enough meat for supper, sandwiches, and perhaps one small future argument about whether the leftovers were meant for hash. The butcher, Carl, wears a clean apron and the expression of a man accustomed to translating household plans into wrapped parcels. He knows many women by sight, and most by preferred cut. This is useful, though it can feel mildly invasive in a town where everyone tracks your roast choices. When your turn comes, you ask for a beef roast for braising. You ask for one around 3 pounds. You mention that you want it well trimmed, but not so lean that it forgets its duty. Carl nods in the grave way of a man handling very specific domestic hopes. He turns to the block behind him and speaks in a language made mostly of pounds, cuts, and confidence. You watch his hands search the chilled case with professional calm. He lifts one roast and then another. The first is a little too thin at one end. The second has a better shape, more even, with enough marbling to promise tenderness after a long afternoon in a covered pot. You ask to see the second one more closely. This is expected. Nobody with sense commits to a roast by faith alone. Carl holds it up over white paper, and you inspect the grain, the thickness, and the edge of fat. It should look sturdy without looking showy. Pot roast is not there to impress anyone. It is there to do dependable work. You ask if it is from the chuck. He says yes, and says it will cook up nice and tender. He says this with the practiced assurance of a man he has said the same thing 6 times today and means it every time. You agree on the second roast. Carl wraps it in white butcher paper with quick flat folds. He winds pink string around the parcel and writes the weight and price in blue pencil on top. The wrapped roast lands in your cart with the pleasant seriousness of a good decision. Dinner now exists in a visible form. That alone improves the afternoon. You are still adjusting the paper parcel so it does not crush the lettuce when Betty Hargrove appears beside you. Of course she does. Betty has a gift for arriving at the exact point where an errand becomes measurable. She wears gloves too light to be practical and a coat with a clean little collar. Her cart contains celery, coffee, a can of pineapple, and a dessert gelatin in a flavor too ambitious for an ordinary Tuesday. Betty's kitchen has the calm, curated perfection of a future Pinterest board, though, thankfully, nobody is pinning anything but blame on humidity. Betty smiles in the warm, polished way of someone who has already finished her morning and perhaps a part of tomorrow. She glances at your parcel and then at Carl with a look that says she also takes dinner seriously. This is not rivalry in the dramatic sense. It is neighborhood weather. You ask if she is making roast too? She says no, she is doing Swiss steak tonight because it cooks evenly and frees the oven for a molded salad. She says molded salad the way some people say vacation home. You tell her the roast looked best today. She says the beef has been reliable this week, though the green beans look tired by the front display. This is how information travels from one kitchen to another, disguised as casual chat. You mention that your celery needed a careful search. Betty says she came earlier and got a decent bunch. She says it kindly, which somehow makes the sentence feel even more complete. Carl asks Betty what cut she prefers, and she answers at once. The answer is exact, down to thickness and trim. You admire this, while also deciding never to let her see you hesitate over gravy again. Betty asks whether you are baking later. She says she smelled vanilla from your window yesterday. She delivers this as a simple observation, though you both understand it is also reconnaissance. You say you might do a spice cake, if the afternoon allows. You mention that your brown sugar is out, which sounds practical and also slightly strategic. Betty nods, as if filing away the fact that your pantry reaches limits like other mortal kitchens. She says her husband has been asking for lemon pie. You picture her meringue rising in one obedient cloud. You picture your own last pie beat up around the edges, like it was considering an alternate career. Still, you smile and ask if her new refrigerator shelves are working well. She says they are, though the butter compartment sticks in damp weather. This is excellent news. Even perfection, it turns out, occasionally catches. The exchange lasts less than 3 minutes. It contains enough domestic intelligence to fuel 2 households through supper. If diplomacy were conducted over celery and roast, the world would probably move at a gentler pace. Betty lets you go first toward the dairy case. You thank her and steer your cart away with care. There is no winner, exactly, though she somehow remains slightly ahead, as always, by a margin invisible to science. The dairy section runs cold along your bare forearm as you reach in for milk. Glass bottles sit in ranks with cream lines faint at the top. You take butter, eggs, and a carton of cottage cheese that was not on the list, but seems capable of becoming lunch tomorrow. You inspect each egg carton with the solemn concentration of a jeweler. A cracked egg is not only waste, it is also a mood. At the register, women unload carts in a rhythm all their own. Heavy things first, fragile things last. Nobody announces this. Everybody obeys it with the seriousness of church seating. The cashier knows to keep soap apart from food if you place the box off to one side. You help by grouping items in little family units across the counter. The roast goes down with ceremony. The eggs remain near your hand until the very end, guarded like tiny oval secrets. Paper bags rise one by one at the bagging stand. Cans go into the bottom. Produce nests along the sides. Bread and eggs take the top, like honored guests who bruise at insult. You pay, tuck the receipt into your wallet, and collect your change into the class purse. The bags feel manageable when lifted one at a time. They feel more philosophical when all gathered together. Outside, the noon air has warmed a little. Car doors open and close around the lot with hollow sounds. A child somewhere asks for a soda, and a mother answers with the calm patience of someone who still has 2 more errands and no illusions. You carry one bag in each hand and pause to settle their weight evenly. The paper handles press flat against your fingers. They make you aware of every can of tomatoes and every worthy intention you have purchased. The walk home feels longer with milk and beef and soap tugging downward. Still, there is a steady satisfaction in it. You are carrying not just groceries, but the rough outline of the next 2 days. The roast sits dense and cool against a bag of onions. The bread rides lightly above the eggs, protected by good packing and your own alert steps. This is the kind of quiet engineering that never receives praise and somehow keeps entire households moving. Halfway down the block, you shift the bags to ease your hands. The paper rustles against your skirt. The loaf of bread gives a soft, yeasty smell through its wrapper, faint but comforting. You pass Betty's house and notice her curtains have not moved. She is likely already home by the side door, placing her Swiss steak in a pan with the kind of efficiency that would make a stopwatch blush. You wish her well, in the broad spiritual sense, while also hoping her gelatin takes just slightly longer than expected. At your own gate, one paper bag creaks in a way that deserves immediate respect. You stop and support the bottom with your forearm. Grocery bags teach humility faster than sermons. Mrs. Kowalski is there again, of course, watering something near her porch. She sees the wobbling bag, gives one brief nod, and turns the hose a little farther left. She never says anything alarming. She simply witnesses, like a patron saint of merely dropped produce. Inside the house, the kitchen greets you with its same long refrigerator hum. The room feels cooler after the street. You set the bags on the table first, then move the milk straight to the icebox because cold things earn immediate shelter. There is only one proper order for unpacking, and your hands know it before your head names it. Cold things first, then eggs and butter, then bread, then cans, then dry goods. Potatoes and onions last, into their dark places where they can think about being useful. You open the refrigerator door with your hip and slide the milk bottles into place. The butter goes into the dish. The cottage cheese takes the shelf beside the leftovers, where it looks surprisingly pleased with itself. Eggs come next, still whole, which feels like a small moral victory. You move them from carton to tray, one by one. Their shells are faintly chalky against your fingertips. The roast goes into the icebox on a plate to catch any wandering juices. The white paper parcel already smells faintly of cold meat and butcher paper, a smell both plain and promising. It will come out again later with onions, flour, and your good heavy pot. Bread goes into the box, and then out again because you remember the older heels should be used first. You turn the loaf around and feel absurdly triumphant. Household management often means catching yourself in these tiny acts of invisible cleverness. The cans line up in the pantry with labels facing out. Tomatoes with tomatoes, peaches with peaches, green beans beside soup, though not too near the gelatin, because that way lies category collects. The brown sugar is poured into its crock with a dry, sandy slide. Flour settles into the canister and leaves a soft dust on the rim. You wipe it with your thumb and then with a towel, because beginnings are nicer when they start tidy. The soap flakes go high on the shelf, away from the food. Their sharp, clean scent rises at once. It makes the onions on the table smell even more onion-like, which hardly seems possible. You carry the potatoes to the cool lower cupboard. You set them beside the last two survivors from the old batch and mentally promote the older pair to first use. The onions follow into their wire basket, papery skins whispering together. The parsley goes into a glass of water by the window. The lettuce is unwrapped and dried a little more with a towel. The apples settle into the bowl on the table and immediately improve the room by existing there. Your handbag rests on the chair again, now much lighter. You take out the receipt and smooth it on the table. The figures add up to exactly what they already were, which is never surprising and always faintly personal. You tuck the receipt beneath the sugar bowl for later. The envelope list, now crossed through and softened at the folds, goes into the drawer where old lists live out their retirement. They seem to like one another there. For a moment, you stand still in the center of the kitchen. The errand is over. The house feels stocked, prepared, and gently defended against hunger for another day or two. The refrigerator hums. A car passes outside. Somewhere on the street, a screen door bangs and then settles. On the table, the apples shine softly in the noon light. In the icebox, the roast waits in its white paper coat. The whole afternoon stands ahead of you in a calm and useful row, as orderly as cans on a pantry shelf. The afternoon begins with a cake box standing upright on the counter, like a cheerful little promise. You set it beside the mixing bowl and smooth the cardboard with your palm. The colors are soft and bright at once. They look almost too pleased with themselves. The kitchen still holds the faint smell of dish soap and yesterday's bacon grease. The refrigerator hums its one long note from the corner. The formica feels cool and flat under your fingertips. You turn the box around and read the directions again, though you already know them. 1 egg waits in a saucer near the sink. The bottle of oil leaves a small amber ring on the counter. There is a particular dignity to a boxed cake mix in 1955. It is modern without being careless. It says you understand progress, but you still own a proper cake pan. You cut the paper packet open with kitchen scissors and tip the powder into the bowl. A little pale cloud rises and settles on the rim. It smells faintly of sugar and something tidy and official. You add the egg and water and oil in the order suggested, and you stir with a wooden spoon that has gone smooth from years of soups and puddings. The batter thickens and turns glossy. At first it resists the spoon with a dry little drag. Then it loosens and comes together all at once. Soon it looks obedient and almost proud of itself. You scrape the sides of the bowl with a rubber spatula that bends at the edge. The last streaks disappear into the yellow swirl. A box cake likes clear instructions and steady hands. That is part of its charm. It asks very little of you. It does not require 7 mysterious steps and a special pan found only in magazines. The women's magazine near the bread box suggests a party cake with pineapple, marshmallow, and several emotional obligations. It is basically a lifestyle influencer in printed form. It smiles from the table and expects impossible things from canned fruit. You prefer the plain layer cake that fits your own afternoon. It can sit calmly beside coffee after supper. It can also endure Gerald's quiet opinion about sweetness with decent manners. You grease the pan with a folded piece of waxed paper dipped in shortening. Then you dust it with flour and tap out the extra. A small white crescent lands near the stove. The oven has already been heating, slow and faithful, while you clear the lunch things. When you open the door, a wave of dry warmth touches your knees. The metal racks glow with that faint used oven smell. You pour the batter into the pan and watch it spread to the corners. It levels itself with a lazy seriousness. You give the pan 2 firm taps against the counter. That sound feels useful. It suggests order returning to the day. Even the chrome percolator on the back burner seems to approve with a mild, settled silence. This morning it gurgled with purpose, which usually means the day stays mostly within reason. A slow, uncertain drip would have warned you more clearly. It would have said the laundry basket has hidden ambitions. You slide the pan into the oven and close the door with a soft metal note.
The kitchen becomes a waiting room for sweetness. You set the timer and wipe the spoon clean with one finger. The batter tastes exactly like childhood and packaging. It tastes like optimism with a little salt. You wash your hand at once because the sink is right there and adulthood has rules. The cake is only the first promise of the afternoon. The heavier promise waits beside the icebox in brown butcher paper. It leaves a cold, damp patch on the counter. You untie the string and unfold the paper slowly. The roast sits there with the sober look of something that intends to occupy several hours. It is not flashy, but it means supper. A pot roast does not hurry for anyone. It asks for a low oven and a free afternoon. It believes in patience the way a church clock believes in time. You pat the meat dry with paper toweling and trim one loose flap of fat. Then you rub it with salt and pepper until your fingertips feel a little grainy. The smell is plain and clean. A heavy roasting pan waits on the stove with a shallow shine of drippings. You set the roast inside and hear the softest, damp thud. The pan receives it like a deep chair. Around it, you scatter thick onion wedges and peeled carrots cut into blunt pieces. You add celery if it is still crisp enough. You tuck in potatoes with skin scrubbed clean but left on. The vegetables look earnest and practical. They are not trying to impress anyone. They are simply preparing to become tender and fragrant in due course. You pour in a little water and a little more than that. A bay leaf goes on top like a decorative thought. Then you cover the pan and slide it into the lower oven rack. The heat is low and patient. It doesn't rush, and neither do you. The roast settles into its long private work while the house holds still around it. Soon the kitchen smells rounder and warmer than it did an hour ago. Onion begins to sweeten at the edges. The air near the stove feels softer against your face. You think of 5:40 without needing to look at the clock. Gerald leaves at 7:42 with his hat slightly crooked. He returns at 5:40 with a briefcase and a precise feeling about something. Tonight the feeling may concern gravy thickness, potato softness, or the angle of a dinner roll. It will be specific and sincerely held. You already know this, which is almost comforting. Across the street, Betty Hargrove's curtains move once and settle again. Her kitchen is pure Pinterest before anyone has invented the word. You can feel her countertops being spotless from here. Betty is not unkind. She is simply always half a step ahead of everyone in practical matters. If dinner had report cards, hers would already be signed and filed. You rinse your hands and reach for the gelatin box from the pantry shelf. The bright package promises elegance in a ring shape. It makes this promise very casually. This is where afternoon confidence begins to wobble. You are a competent woman with a house, a schedule, and good potholders. You are also a reluctant Jell-O artist. You choose the ring mold because optimism still has some energy left. Its grooves catch the light from the window. It looks innocent in the way a polished trap looks innocent. The water kettle begins to murmur on the burner. You tear open the powder and pour it into a glass bowl. The crystals shine in the bowl like tiny red window glass. The hot water hits and the color blooms at once. You stir until the grains vanish. The spoon clinks lightly against the side, bright and delicate. Then you add the cold water and watch the whole thing deepen into a clear jewel tone. It is too pretty to trust completely. Anything this cheerful tends to have opinions. You consider fruit for a moment and settle on canned pears cut into small, neat pieces. They slide from the can with a quiet, wet sigh. You blot them on a towel so they behave. A proper molded salad in this decade, nearly anything with a brave face. Cottage cheese appears in magazines with alarming confidence. You decide that pears and gelatin are challenge enough for one Wednesday. You rinse the mold in cool water and set it on a folded dish towel. Then you pour the liquid in carefully so the fruit stays somewhat where you asked. One pear cube immediately ignores you. The mold goes into the refrigerator beside a covered bowl of leftover beans. It wobbles once as you settle the shelf. Then it becomes a waiting project with an uncertain future. The refrigerator hums on, patient and unblinking. It gives no advice. It never does, though it witnesses nearly everything. You wash the bowl at once,
because gelatin likes to leave evidence. The warm water turns faintly pink at the drain. Your hands smell lightly of fruit and dish soap. By now, the cake has risen and browned at the edges. You open the oven and a sweet vanilla warmth slides into the room. The top springs back when you touch it gently. You set the cake on a wire rack by the window. The pan ticks softly as it cools. That little sound always suggests a machine thinking over its choices. For frosting, you decide on the sensible middle road between modern ease and old standards. The cake comes from a box. The icing will come from your own bowl. You soften butter in a mixing dish and sift powdered sugar into it. A little cocoa joins in for color and gravity. A spoonful of milk turns the whole thing smooth. The spoon leaves curling ridges as you stir. You scrape the sides and stir again until it shines. It smells rich enough to count as effort. This compromise pleases you. It says you welcome convenience, but not complete surrender. You are not about to let a cardboard box have all the glory. The roast continues its slow work in the oven. When you lift the lid for a look, a warm cloud rises and fogs your glasses. The onions have gone translucent and sweet. You turn the vegetables with a long spoon and baste the meat carefully. The broth has darkened and picked up a little fat at the edges. It shimmers in the pan like quiet amber. You add another splash of water and close the oven again. The door seals in that heavy, good smell. A long afternoon meal should always seem a little secretive. Out the window, the neighbor's lawn remains somehow greener than yours. It manages this daily with no visible strain. You suspect Betty waters at dawn with military precision and a small smile. The clock in the dining room moves toward late afternoon. The light begins to flatten and mellow. This is the hour when you trust your kitchen or begin bargaining with it. You think of the Jell-O and open the refrigerator door for a polite inspection. The mold gives a soft, uncertain tremble. It is not firm, but it is not entirely hopeless. A wiser person would close the door and wait another hour. You are not foolish exactly. You are simply trying to get several things done before 5:40. There is cake to frost, and potatoes to test, and a table to set. The Jell-O seems nearly ready from one angle. It seems persuasive in the dim refrigerator light. You decide that 40 minutes early is not truly early if the house is warm. You support this theory with confidence that feels very homemade. Then you fetch the serving plate. The plate is oval and slightly too large, which makes the whole business feel ceremonial. You dip the mold briefly into warm water at the sink. You count to 5 and hope. Then you dry the outside with a towel and place the plate over the top. Your palms press cool glass and cool china together. You take a small breath and invert. For a second, nothing happens. That second has a surprising amount of personality. It hangs there like a clerk waiting for the exact right form. Then something happens, and unfortunately, it is not elegance. The gelatin drops halfway, pauses, and leans. One side releases with confidence, and the other side keeps private counsel. You lift the mold a fraction, and the ring slumps onto the plate in a glossy red surrender. Pears slide toward the lower edge with determined little nudges. A clear puddle gathers at once. You stare with the stillness of someone watching a very small landslide. The shape resembles a tired hat. It may also resemble a map of somewhere no one visits by choice. This is why the Jell-O mold holds all the power. It is made of sugar and certainty, yet it can humble an entire afternoon with one gentle sigh. You try the knife method next, sliding a thin blade along the stubborn side. That only convinces another section to collapse artistically. The ring now has modern ideas about structure. You put the mold back down and consider your options with remarkable calm. Panic would be wasted here. Gelatin has never improved under emotional pressure. The refrigerator hum deepens behind you, long and steady. It sounds almost like disapproval, though that may be your own conscience, wearing an appliance voice. You have heard stranger things in a quiet kitchen. You decide to reverse the event as much as possible. With a broad spoon, you coax the leaning mass back into the mold. It goes in with the dignity of a wet mitten. Some of the pears resist relocation and remain on the plate. You tuck them back where they seem least noticeable. A ring mold in distress invites creativity and slightly lowered standards. At that exact moment, Mrs. Kowalski appears at the side gate. She does not rattle it or call out first. She simply arrives, as though drawn by a change in household pressure. You see her through the screen door, with the spoon still in your hand. The plate gleams red in your other hand. The situation explains itself better than words could manage. She takes in the mold, the spoon, and your expression with one complete glance. Then she gives the smallest nod in recorded history. It contains sympathy, knowledge, and not a trace of rescue. You open the door an inch and ask if she needs anything. She says she only has your clothespin bag from Monday. Then she holds it out and waits while you accept your fate and the bag. You thank her and set the clothespins on the chair by the door. She looks once more at the wounded dessert. Then she nods again and withdraws with the solemn grace of a witness. Nothing alarming has happened. Nothing even unusual has happened. Still, being observed during a Jell-O collapse feels oddly official. You return the patient back to the refrigerator with renewed firmness. The mold settles onto the shelf with a damp little sound. It now has 40 more minutes to reflect on its behavior. You wipe the plate and choose another one, smaller this time, just in case geometry helps later. The first plate goes into the dish drainer like a dismissed stage prop. Some afternoons require revisions. When you close the refrigerator door, your own reflection looks back at you from the enamel trim. A strand of hair has escaped near your temple. You smooth it back with pink, cool fingers. The roast deserves attention before the cake grows lonely. You lift the lid again and test a carrot with the tip of a fork. It yields, but not yet in the way supper needs. The meat has darkened beautifully around the edges. A spoonful of broth tastes salty, rich, and almost ready. You add another pinch of pepper because the moment asks for confidence restored. The kitchen has become a stew of good smells now.
Sweet cake lingers near the window. Savory roast fills the warmer air near the stove and drifts into the hallway.
You turn the cake out at last and peel away the thin browned paper from the bottom. The layer releases cleanly, which feels like a small apology from the universe.
You set it right side up and let it breathe.
When it is cool enough, you spread the icing across the top in slow, broad arcs. The cocoa frosting gathers in soft ridges. Each pass of the knife leaves a neat satin line. You are not trying to make a bakery showpiece or making a Wednesday cake. That means generous corners, a level top, and enough frosting to keep everyone kind. A few crumbs stray into the bowl and tint the last bit darker. You smooth the sides anyway and call it honest. Cakes, unlike Jell-O molds, often reward reasonable expectations. You cut a narrow sliver from one edge where the pan rose unevenly. This is not theft. This is quality control in its purest suburban form. The bite is tender and mild and very much of its decade. A boxed cake has its own soft grain and agreeable sweetness. It tastes like a new washing machine advertisement made edible. By late afternoon, the dining room begins to ask quiet questions of you. The table sits bare under the window. The good china waits behind glass with its thin rose border and excellent posture. You pause with a dish towel in your hands and consider Wednesday as a category. Wednesday is not an anniversary. Wednesday is not company. Wednesday is often meatloaf and modest ambitions, yet the roast smells patient and important. The cake cools like a reward already earned. Even the Jell-O, despite recent behavior, still intends to attend in some form. You open the cabinet and lift out one plate at a time. The china feels lighter than the everyday dishes. Its edges ring with a finer little note when you set them down.
Using the good china on a Wednesday feels slightly rebellious in a tidy domestic way.
It is luxury at $4 a week. It is also insurance against Gerald forming an opinion about plain plates. You carry the stack carefully to the table and place each setting in its place. The cloth under your hands is smooth from careful ironing. Miraculously, the brown dripping iron spared it this time. That iron has the soul of a practical joker. It waits 20 minutes and then sighs brown water onto white cotton. It is the 1950s standing desk, except hotter and much less aspirational. You set the forks to the left and the knives to the right, with their blades turned inward. The spoons gleam a little more softly. They are polished enough to reflect a blurred ceiling light. Glasses go above the knives, with one thumbprint quickly buffed away. The salt and pepper shakers take their familiar places like a married couple. The butter dish sits between them, with modest authority.
You stand back and decide the table needs the small vase.
A few backyard leaves go into it, because flowers are not available every day. The leaves look perfectly willing to represent elegance. In the sideboard drawer, the linen napkins wait folded in careful squares. You shake them open, one by one, and lay them across the plates. They settle with a quiet, soft certainty. The room changes at once. It becomes less of a room you pass through. It becomes a room where evening intends to happen properly. You glance at the clock again and think of the final minutes before arrival. At 5:40, the front door will open. Shoes will sound in the hallway, and the house will present its case. There is still the matter of the Jell-O. You return to the refrigerator with a firmer plate and lower expectations. That combination improves many household tasks. This time, the mold feels cooler and more secure in your hands. You dip it in warm water even more briefly than before. Then you invert with less hope and better technique. The ring releases in one smooth, glossy slide. It is not perfect, and no one could honestly call it perfect. One side bears a faint scar where history has occurred. Still, it holds. The pears remain mostly suspended where nature and persistence have placed them. The shape is recognizably intentional, which is all a Wednesday truly asks. You place a few lettuce leaves around the base, because that is what one does now. The green ruffle helps everything look planned. It is garnish as diplomacy. From the window, you catch a glimpse of Betty at her fence, right on schedule. Her posture suggests she has already unmolded something flawless, at least an hour ago. You salute her silently with the lettuce. The roast comes out next, and rests on the stove beneath a loose sheet of foil. The vegetables crowd around it in soft, fragrant heaps. You stir the pan juices and think kindly of gravy. The cake waits on its stand with cocoa icing set just enough to shine. The china glows pale in the dining room. The Jell-O holds itself together through force of will and refrigeration. You wipe the last damp circle from the counter and rinse the spoon that started it all. The house grows very still for a moment. In that stillness, the refrigerator hums, the oven cools, and evening gathers itself. Nothing dramatic has happened, which is exactly the comfort of it. You bake, you baste, you set the table, and you negotiate with gelatin. The whole afternoon passes in these small, serious acts. When the key turns later, supper will already be waiting in its good dishes. The roast will slice, the cake will yield, and the Jell-O will make its uneasy public appearance. Wednesday, against all odds, will look prepared. You come back, for a quiet moment, to the small things that stay in your hands long after the day is done. You feel the cool formica under your fingertips in the early kitchen light. You hear the refrigerator holding its one long note in the corner, like a patient machine that has no plans to become interesting before breakfast. You remember the percolator deciding the mood of the morning with its steady chrome gurgle. You remember how much comfort sits inside that sound when the day is still folded up and harmless. You glance again at the ironing board, which spends 2 long hours pretending to be useful furniture while asking your shoulders to do all the work. You see the iron pause above a white shirt with the innocent look of an object that absolutely knows what it has done. Then comes the brown drip, right on schedule, like a petty little weather event that affects only your laundry and your opinion of modern progress. You can almost smile at that now, where the cold air meets you at the door, and the floors shine in a way your own kitchen floor never quite manages. You pass the shelves with the quiet focus of a person who knows exactly how much soup, flour, and celery a house can require in 1 week. You let Carl point at a roast with the grave confidence of a man who has never had to stretch one across several opinions and 2 helpings. You come home with paper bags pressed into your arms and set them down on the counter with the special relief that belongs only to groceries. Later, the whole house changes as the roast begins its slow work in the oven. The air turns richer. The rooms feel softer. Even the hallway seems to settle when that warm smell reaches it. Then there is that very good hour at the end, when the dish towel is hung straight, the counters are wiped, and the table is waiting in its best simple order. You open the magazine to a recipe that asks too much of both your pantry and your patience. It offers decorative fruit, molded salad, and a level of confidence about canned pineapple that feels almost spiritual. You read 3 pages and do not believe a word of them. You look up once or twice to move a fork by a 1/4 inch, and then again to smooth a napkin that no one else would ever notice. Across the street, Betty Hargrove's house stands there in its usual state of alarming readiness, as if the whole place has already been approved by a panel of invisible judges. Your own house is not perfect. It is simply ready. That turns out to be better. In the low afternoon light, with the roast sending its slow promise through every room, that small finished feeling may be the truest luxury of the day. Now, the house grows even quieter in the mind. The work no longer asks anything from you, and the evening gathers its soft weight around the chair, the teacup, and the fading square of light on the floor. And at last the percolator, having done its part and passed judgment in your favor, sits still and shiny on the counter like a tired little foreman who knows the shift is over. May your dreams be free of collapsing Jell-O molds and Gerald's quiet opinions about gravy. May your ironing piles stand forever at 0. And may Betty's lawn develop one small brown patch. May the percolator always sound confident on a Wednesday morning. Thank you for listening. May your thoughts rest easy.